Hi, I'm Frank Inferna. I'm an associate professor here in the Department of Psychology. And in this paper, together with my colleague Sunil Luther, we systematically reviewed the resilience literature in adulthood and old age. So we went through, in total, we included 77 studies where we systematically looked at the methodology that they used to examine resilience to various adversities such as spousal loss, unemployment, military deployment. So we looked at a wide range of adversities. But I think more importantly as well, we discussed, and really based on our review, we discussed future directions. So how is it that the literature can kind of move forward? So the review is more about where are we at right now, but in terms of thinking about the next 5 to 10 years, how can we really move the research field forward? And then as kind of the end part, so like the third part of the article, really, it's pretty comprehensive in that we provide guidelines or tenets for a conceptual framework. So how is it that we can go about studying resilience to adversity, because it is something that happens throughout the course of our lives, and as researchers, what are kind of some guidelines or guiding posts that we can really have to further our ability to study resilience, and in terms of how that is disseminated as well in the public. In terms of the methodological assumptions, as researchers, when we're applying especially longitudinal methods, there are certain assumptions that are built in to the models, and so in our review, this is one of the criteria that we were looking at. So in the context of growth mixture modeling, so this ability for researchers to identify these underlying distinct trajectories of resilience or recovery. Over 80% of the previous studies have applied methodological assumptions, where when we, in a previous paper, tested them further, we see that they artificially inflate the number and proportion of individuals that are deemed resilient. So that paper 2 years ago was kind of the launching pad, and once we were like, hey, what's going on here in terms of these assumptions, we've done some follow-up papers, but then this review is kind of the capstone in terms of really systematically going over the literature and seeing, is this just a one-off thing? But of the 77 studies, over 80% do apply some of these questionable methodological assumptions, and so this is another kind of where we then discuss future directions in terms of how do we go about studying resilience further. And another thing that we had discovered in looking through the studies is that an overwhelming number, so again, over 80% would include just one outcome in the empirical study. So the overarching study may have, as researchers, we try to include every measure possible. But in terms of in the published articles, they were just looking at depressive symptoms, or just looking at post-traumatic stress symptoms. And based on the inclusion of just a single outcome, these grandiose statements about resilience being the common response have been made. So we're kind of calling out the literature, so to speak, in this sense, in terms of, hey, when we look at more than one outcome, a different picture emerges. People may not be exhibiting high levels of depressive symptoms following their job loss or losing their spouse, but when you look at their everyday day-to-day functioning, whether at work, their social relationships, or their physical health, they may be showing poor levels of functioning, so they may not be doing as well in those other domains. Thinking more broadly about the implications of our review of the literature, I think we need to think about when we're looking at studies focusing on resilience, and I think we need to be careful not to diagnose resilience based on a single outcome, because depending on the outcome we study, but also depending on the individual, the resources they have available, their adjustment to losing their spouse or their job or military deployment is going to depend. There's going to be a tremendous amount of variability across individuals in how it is that they're able to adjust to this adversity, adapt, or whether or not they're able to.